Welcome to part 6 of our live training session here with our supercharged LS Swap 944 Porsche. Now, the last few videos, we've learned how to calibrate and tune our vehicle from start to finish for both 93 octane and for ethanol-based fuels using a flex fuel sensor. Now, we're on day 2 of our live training session, so we're going to be taking a look at the cold start on our ethanol fuel, making sure the engine's going to fire up and run appropriately and have a good air fuel and warm up properly. We're also going to be taking a look at how to tune and work with our acceleration enrichment, which is a key to making sure that the engine is going to drive smoothly. As you're having rapid throttle changes, we need to make sure we have an appropriate amount of fuel being added in proportional to the airflow as it's coming into the engine. We have a lot to cover. Let's jump in so we can check out working with our cold start and acceleration enrichment. Welcome back to our live training session here with our LS Swap 944 Porsche. In our last video, we completed the flex fuel tuning process. Now we're ready to take a look at the cold start, after start tuning, and warm up enrichment tuning. On day 2, I've let the engine sit overnight here and cool down completely. So we're going to be firing it off and evaluating all of the fuel delivery demands that we're going to have on a cold engine. So the engine is going to be able to start up, idle properly, and warm up into normal operating temperature. Now, a couple things we want to talk about here before we move into taking a look at this and testing and making sure that the engine's actually going to fire off and run an appropriate air fuel. Just make sure that we have all of our bases covered. So the first thing I want to discuss is taking a look at the main fuel table here. So we've dialed this main VE table in, whether your speed density, fuel flow rate tuning with the Holley or your VE based tuning. The main table represents the fuel delivery for an engine when the engine is fully warmed up. So we're up to 160, 180 degrees. This means that we've overcame the majority of the wall-wooding effects that happen when we spray the fuel out of the injector, and as it sprays and atomizes, the fuel is going to get into the engine relatively efficiently when the engine is warm. When the engine's cold, we have this wall-wetting effect where the fuel doesn't atomize very well, and as the temperature goes lower and lower, so as the temperature drops to, let's say, 60 degrees, 40 degrees, 0 degrees, this wall-wetting effect is going to get worse and worse because the atomization is going to get worse as the temperature starts to drop. So we need to overcome this. In order to make sure that the engine's going to run properly, we're going to inject additional fuel on a cold engine compared to a warm engine so that we have fuel being sprayed into the engine as efficiently as possible, and making sure that we have the proper amount of cranking fuel so the engine fires off. The second thing, after the engine is fired off and it's running and it's coming up to operating temperature, we need to go and richen up the air-fuel mixture, and we need to provide additional amount of fuel so the engine isn't going to hesitate, it's not going to have lean misfiring as it's starting to warm up, because again, the main table represents the engine as it's fully warmed up. We'll find that these are modifiers that are going to be applying themselves on top of the base pulse width that's calculated from our main fuel table. We know on a warm engine, whether it's on pump gas or on flex fuel, that at idle, for example, when we're just simply idling, the closed loop compensation is barely trimming and adding or taking away any fuel because the idle area of the table here is solid. Likewise, all throughout the rest of the table, everything else looks good in terms of drivability and wide open throttle performance. So what we're going to do here when the engine fires off, because we know the main fuel table has been dialed in 100%, that allows us to evaluate looking at the after start and the warm-up enrichment and then even the cranking fuel. Now, what's going to be a little bit specific about this is that we're going to be testing the cranking fuel for a cold engine on ethanol. So we have ethanol in our fuel system as we changed over from pump gas to ethanol in the last video. Ethanol has even worse atomization as we're talking about a cold engine, specifically under cranking. We have to add a substantial amount more fuel on ethanol on a cold engine compared to petrol fuel because it is that much worse in terms of atomization and the wall-wetting effect. So we need to ramp up that cranking fuel in order to get the engine to fire off. Oftentimes, depending on the temperature, what the ambient temperature is at and what the engine is cooled down at, we can find we need anywhere from 50 to up to 200, 300% more fuel under cranking conditions to get the engine to fire off on ethanol. So as the temperature gets colder, the need for more fuel grows exponentially with ethanol. Now, a couple things about this. Let's jump in here. Let's first talk about our cranking fuel. So the first thing we need to worry about in talking about getting the engine to fire off cold is the cranking fuel. That's going to allow the engine to crank and fire. Then, after the engine fires off, it's after start enrichment. That's going to be applying for the first 5 to roughly 20, 30 seconds after the engine's fired off. Then it moves into warm-up enrichment, which is our coolant temp enrichment, which is going to be more of a long-term adder in our fuel delivery to get things sorted out until the engine comes up to operating temperature. But if we take a look at startup enrichment, we have our cranking fuel table. This cranking fuel table here, it's based on coolant temperature, and then here In the top, it's based on our cranking fuel pound per hour. That's going to be what it delivers in terms of fuel flow rate to the engine. Now, the nice thing about the Holley is it standardizes looking at the cranking fuel because we specify what we want for the fuel flow rate in pound per hour, depending on what the injector size. Thanks for checking out our teaser clip. If you want to see the rest of this video and more than 500 hours of current EFI training we have to offer, make sure you click right here. If you want to go and check out more teaser clips from this training course, click here, and you don't want to miss any of the videos we're going to be releasing on this channel, so make sure you subscribe and click here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.